Hello, everybody. I am Collin Schenk. I'm a doctor with Swedish's Addiction Recovery Services. And as Dr. Dow just mentioned, I graduated from the Swedish First Family Medicine residency in June of last year, and our three talks were canceled because of the pandemic. So I'm grateful to be invited back to be able to give an R3 talk this year. Be wrapping up with a 15-minute talk here called Demystifying the Methadone Clinic. And I chose to give this talk because I graduated residency really not knowing what the patient experiences is like in opioid treatment programs. We often started patients on methadone in the hospital and then discharged them directly to their OTP intake appointment. I had patients coming into a primary care clinic telling me about questions or concerns they were having about their methadone clinic visits, but I didn't ever really know how to respond to them. And so after graduation, I was fortunate to be able to work as a locums provider in a OTP called We Care Daily Clinics in Auburn. And that's the source of a lot of this talk, is my experience there and what I've learned from Dr. Hutch, who's the medical director at We Care Clinic. So I'd like to acknowledge him from the outset here, as well as Dr. Greg Parada, one of my colleagues at ARS, who is also the medical director at the Canyon Park OTP. So my objectives here is first to describe OTP's rules and regulations that shape patient experiences, and then review methadone dosing protocols at OTPs, because I think these are two of the common things that come up for primary care providers, family medicine doctors in general. So first, what is a methadone clinic? The name methadone clinic really is a bit of a misnomer. The more accurate name for a methadone clinic is the opioid treatment program, or OTP. OTPs are federally regulated programs through 42 CFR 8.12. This is like really the rule book that guides everything that happens at OTPs. And again, federally regulated. Compare that to the OBOT, or office-based opioid treatment program, that most family medicine doctors are more familiar with. That's where we're typically prescribing buprenorphine products as a medication for opioid use disorder. That was expanded federally through Data 2000, but is regulated more on the state level. So the reason that methadone clinic is a bit of a misnomer is that OTPs are not just clinics where methadone is given. The idea that they are just dispensaries for methadone, I think, is part of the stigma that they carry, and understanding that they offer a lot of other services to support people who have chosen to pursue this recovery approach is important. So at an OTP, individual counseling with an SUDP is typically required. There's also usually group counseling services that are available. Some OTPs have IOPs too. And finally, they often have peer support, which some OBOT clinics also have. But peer support at an OTP can be really helpful as someone who has lived experiences with substance use and with recovery, who can support people in ways that sometimes a physician or nurse or SUDP might not be able to, and be able to advocate for them. So who should you refer to an OTP for methadone? I thought this was a pretty simple concept going in, and I learned that there's a lot more nuance in how to answer this question, and we'll dig into a little bit of that now. So the first thing is that the person must have an opioid use disorder. OUD is a very well-defined set of criteria in the DSM, and we actually look in detail at what criteria they're meeting to satisfy this to actually be able to enroll at an OTP. So in addition to having that, most patients need to have evidence that their opioid use disorder has been present for more than 1 year. But there are exceptions to that. Two of the exceptions is that the person was released from incarceration in the past 6 months, or that the person is currently pregnant. Why these are the two specific exemptions, I can't really say, and I'll refrain from offering too much critiques on these inclusion criteria right now. Now, there are other criteria around having been treated with methadone in the past, specific criteria for adolescents, but what I really want you to take away is this particular set of information. So let's go into some examples to show how this can get a little bit tricky. So the first case, a 58-year-old patient is prescribed high-dose morphine for chronic pain. Their PCP retires, and the new PCP enforces a rapid taper. The patient purchases methadone from a friend once for withdrawal management and finds it incredibly effective for pain control as well. They then go to an OTP requesting MMT enrollment. This is a case that I've seen, or something similar to this. And so the question is, does this person have an opioid use disorder? Sure, they have tolerance, they have physical dependence, but do they really satisfy any of the other criteria needed to meet OUD? Well, they did purchase methadone one time from someone, but honestly, most OTPs are going to say, no, this person doesn't meet criteria for an opioid use disorder, so they're not going to be able to enroll them. If this person really wants methadone, they're going to be directed to either a pain clinic or an ambitious primary care doctor who wants to prescribe methadone for chronic pain. But as many of you may know, methadone does lead to opioid-induced hyperalgesia, may not be a great long-term option for pain management. So second case, it's a 26-year-old patient who reports smoking heroin 1 gram daily for the past 5 years. They have never injected, they haven't received healthcare during this time, and they haven't been incarcerated. So I trust this person that they've been using heroin for the past 5 years, but does that count as evidence or objective evidence that it's lasted for more than a year? Some medical directors, some OTPs may say, yes, patient history alone is an adequate form of objective evidence. Others may say, no, we need something that is not a subjective reporting. So things that can constitute objective evidence are like seeing in someone's PDMP that they've been on Suboxone in the past, looking at outside medical records that have OUD on the problem list or urine toxins that were positive in the ED. It can be something like physical exam signs, like having scars all over their arms from chronic injection use. It can be something like a letter from someone who has known them for a long time, like a parent who attests to the duration of their opioid use disorder. So again, not as clear cut as you would think, but it may be worth referring to this person to the OTP so that they can help try to advocate for them to meet this criteria. Now, there is an alternative for people who don't meet this criteria, and that is entering the 180-day methadone detox. This is the alternative to methadone maintenance. The idea of a 180-day methadone detox is that someone should be tapered off completely within 180 days or 6 months of starting methadone. So there's the possibility that you could very rapidly or not at all taper somebody off within that at the end of that 180 days, and then immediately after re-enter them into another 180 days. And that's a way of gaming the system to get around the fact that there's this arbitrary rule that the opioid use disorder has to last more than a year, or there has to be objective evidence of it. So now a 21-year-old pregnant person is admitted in labor after not receiving any prenatal care. They report that they've been smoking fentanyl for the past 10 months. They're started on methadone on the postpartum unit, and they were last incarcerated 8 months ago. So this person acknowledges their use is less than a year. They're not currently pregnant anymore, and their incarceration was more than 6 months ago. Really tricky case. Again, this is going to depend in part on the OTP and how they want to pursue trying to help this person get onto MMT if that's what the person actually wants. So you could potentially submit for special authorization, argue to advocate for this person to say that they really could or should meet criteria for them. So again, an alternative is to do the 180-day methadone detox. So let's talk a little bit how you start methadone at an OTP. The starting dose is typically going to be 30 milligrams. That's the maximum dose, although you can give them a lower dose if you have concerns that maybe their dependence isn't quite as high as the typical person who's coming to an OTP, or maybe they have other sedating medications and you want to be a little bit more gentle in starting their dose. The second thing is that they really need to show signs, objective signs of opioid withdrawal at the time of initiation. It's not like starting buprenorphine where you need to have substantial withdrawal to avoid precipitated withdrawal. But the reason we need these signs of withdrawal is because we need to know there's actually a physical dependence, and dependence is typically shown through withdrawal. This is a really hard one because a lot of people who come in seeking help have used in the very recent past before they come in. And you see someone, because they're feeling well, they can actually have a really insightful discussion about their addiction, but because they're not having any withdrawal at all, you can't start them on methadone in that moment. And so you have to say, please come back when you're having some withdrawal. That could be 2 hours from now. It could be tomorrow. And as you might imagine, a lot of people, if they're not started on methadone right then, there's a pretty good chance they're not going to come back. And then there's also an initial urine toxicology that's required. And finally, I want to point out that enrollment in OTP requires going through the ASAM assessment. This is a very long assessment that people do with a counselor. It goes through specific dimensions of mental health and addiction, a really intensive process that patients should be prepared for, know that they're going to have to sit through it. Fortunately, many of them can start medications before going through an ASAM assessment, but this can be a challenging thing for some people to complete. So how methadone is titrated at an OTP is very institution specific. The basics of methadone metabolism is that, of course, it's very genetically driven in how methadone is metabolized. In the average person, the half-life of methadone is around 24 hours. And with that long half-life, you're going to get dose stacking until a steady state is reached sometime typically after 4 days, 4 to 7 days. So there are a couple ways that you can do a dose evaluation for methadone at an OTP. So one of them is doing a peak dose evaluation. The peak of methadone is typically like 2 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours after the dose is taken. And the idea is if somebody takes methadone and they come back 3 hours later and they're still having objective signs of withdrawal, it is very unlikely that an extra 10 milligrams is going to cause them to overdose. So it's safe to typically give them that extra 10 milligrams. So what will happen at some institutions is they'll have them come back every other day and do a peak dose evaluation. That's hard though, because some people take their methadone in the morning and then they have responsibilities the rest of the day, or it's hard to come back 3 hours later. Eventually, somebody's going to be feeling well at the peak. And at that point, that's when you switch over to trough dose evaluations. So trough dose evaluations occurs 24 hours after the last dose of methadone was given. And a trough dose evaluation should typically happen when someone's closer to their steady state. So you really need to wait more like 4+ days before you do a trough dose evaluation. So titration of the methadone at a place that feels comfortable doing peak evaluations, you can start out with a fairly rapid increase in methadone, and then it slows down when you have to start doing more of the trough dose evaluations. So what do we do about missed doses? First and foremost, I want to acknowledge that people can do courtesy dosing for planned missed doses. Let's say somebody has to go to Arizona for a wedding or to visit a friend. They can find an OTP near where they're going to be, and then the two OTPs can coordinate to make sure that OTP can continue giving them their doses while they're down there for a week or 2 weeks or however long they really need to. Of course, that requires a lot of legwork on behalf of the person, and they really have to initiate the process. So there are some barriers there. And of course, most of the missed doses that happen are unplanned missed doses. And how unplanned missed doses are managed is also going to be an institution-specific thing. So here's an example. If somebody misses less than 4 consecutive doses, the idea is that odds are they haven't lost very much of their tolerance to methadone, so they don't need to have their dose changed. You take 130 milligrams, you miss 2 days, it's okay, come back in, you'll get 120 milligrams today. But after someone has missed 4 or more consecutive doses, that's when we think people start to lose some of their tolerance. Unless, of course, they're using high amounts of other opioids to maintain their tolerance during that time. So if someone stops using methadone or misses 4 days of methadone and they're not using any other opioids, you can imagine that someone's going to lose around 10% of their tolerance per day. So you may reduce their dose by 10% each day past day 3. And then when you want to get somebody back up to their prior dose, you can do a dose reinstatement schedule. But again, institution specific. Some may just have a standing order to increase that dose. Others may want to do evaluations in person to make sure that that titration is going well and they're re-engaging in care well. So here's an example. A person is stable on methadone at 130 milligrams, and they miss 7 consecutive doses. So after day 3, you start taking down by 10% per day. That'd get them down to around 80 milligrams for reinstatement. And then you could say, let's go up by 10 milligrams per day until we get you back to 130 milligrams. I would say this is a fairly proactive way of trying to get someone back up. And it might be good to talk to them to understand what kind of opioids have they been using in the interim. But I also want to acknowledge that some OTPs have a hard rule, a hard line that says if somebody misses 4 or more consecutive doses, they'll drop their dose all the way down to 30 milligrams. And I feel like this is what I've heard a lot in primary care spaces. People saying, coming in, something happened, they missed 5 days and their dose dropped from 130 down to 30. And they just can't imagine going back through that process of taking sometimes weeks or months to get back to 130 milligrams. I think that's where a lot of loss to follow-up happens. Now, if somebody's out of care for a prolonged period of time, like a month, then they often have to complete the entire intake process again. That means going through that long ASAM assessment, going through a history and physical exam with a provider. While I think that can be expedited in some cases, it can be a barrier for some people to think that they have to go through all of those steps again. And that's to complete a re-enrollment process. Take-home doses, I think, are one of the most common questions that comes up in primary care spaces and the focus for a lot of patients that I've met. So COVID has changed things, at least temporarily, with greater liberties in offering take-home doses for the sake of patient safety, so people don't have to congregate inside small waiting rooms. But according to that 42 CFR that we talked about, all patients can receive 1 weekly take-home dose per week, plus take-home doses on holidays, because clinics are going to be closed on those days. To get a take-home dose like that, we have to document that they have access to safe storage, which is going to be something like a lockbox or a lock bag. And then every 3 months, they can potentially be reevaluated to increase the number of take-home doses. But to be able to get more take-home doses, they have to meet a long list of criteria that can be pretty challenging to meet. So there's pretty standard things like no substance use, consistent clinic attendance, meaning they're not missing doses. But then there's a lot of subjective things like no criminalized behavior. They have to have a stable social environment. Who knows how to define that? And they have to meet this idea of benefit of decreased attendance is greater than the risk of diversion. And there's several other things listed in the 42 CFR. So if someone does meet all of those things, then every 3 months they can get 1 more take-home dose per week. So if you follow that out, it would take around 2 years, over 2 years, to get an entire month's worth of take-home doses. I've heard a lot of people comment about how when someone goes into a methadone clinic, they have to give their urine every day before their dose. And you all may already be aware of this, but I want to make sure folks are fully aware that urine is not checked at every visit. According to the regulations, there has to be an initial urine given at intake, and then a urine needs to be collected monthly at random. And within a 12-month period, there need to be at least 8 tests taken. So again, I want to thank Dr. Hutch for all that I've learned from him and the opportunity to work at WeCare daily clinics in the past, Dr. Parada at ARS in Canyon Park, as well as the ARS team here at Swedish. My resources are a little bit scant. It's mainly the SAMHSA guidelines around this. And I see from Dr. Stevens that the question was, is it possible for a methadone detox patient to become a methadone maintenance patient, or is that blocked by protocol? I think there are ways. For example, while somebody's in that 6-month program of detox, if they're still using and now you have clear evidence during that 6 months, they've reached over a year-long time, you could end up in the meeting criteria. There are opportunities, again, to submit requests for authorization for things. And thanks for Dr. Hutch, who's paying attention, who said they're allowed to go to maintenance after 2 180-day periods. Any additional questions? All right. Thank you all for letting me join, and I'm going to send it back to Dr. Brown.